Haman had a symbol that was on his outfit.
Wait, is this a theory?
This is not a theory. This is actually something that people can look up. And whenever people bow down to Haman, they're supposed to be bowing down to a symbol as well as the person. Welcome back to Out of the Shallows. We're so excited that you guys will be back here for another reading of the book of Esther. And so this has been a really crazy book so far. We're going to just dive right on in because there's so many interesting things that happen in this chapter.
We have been very excited about this chapter because we do have some juicy details to share.
Very juicy.
Just to give a little bit of a recap for those of you who are joining in for the first time and you are like, who the heck are these people and what the heck are they reading? So just to let you know, we are reading the book of Esther. It was actually Alec's choice. It wasn't my choice.
You can do that again. Yep. All right.
It was Alec's choice. So if you're a dude, don't tune out just because we said that. It actually is so rich with history. And
so fascinating.
We love the character of Mordecai. And we hope that you will actually end up kind of falling in love with him too, because he's such a cool dude. And so just to recap a little bit of what's gone on so far, we've had a scandal, if you want to say, in the kingdom. Basically, Queen Vashti, she dishonored her husband in front of all the most powerful people in the entire province of Persia. So she's dethroned, she's outcast. Then we had this campaign against the Greeks where King Xerxes went off and then came back. And now he's like, where's my woman? I have no woman. And so he's like, the bachelor. I am the bachelor. That's right, because he lost to
those Spartans. Let's go.
And so now he did go on a big conquest to try and find a woman this time. And he found Queen Esther. And she is a Jew. She is hiding her nationality. She is keeping it a secret. And so that is where we're jumping back into today. We are reading the New Living Translation for those of you who are joining us for the first time. So we'll be starting in chapter 2, verse 19. Babe, do you want to kick it off? I just feel like I did a lot of talking.
I would love to. Let's go right ahead and let's jump right on into this. So once again, the New Living Translation, chapter 2, verse 19. Even after all the young women had been transferred to the second harem, and Mordecai had become a palace official, Esther continued to keep her family background and nationality a secret. She was still following Mordecai's directions, just as she did when she lived in his home. Once again, there it is. I just love how much, Esther just honors Mordecai. It's so cool. One day, Mordecai was on duty at the king's gate. Two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthana and Teresh, who were guards at the door of the king's private quarters, became angry at the king Xerxes and plotted to assassinate him.
Poor guy.
But Mordecai heard about the plot and gave information to Queen Esther. She then told the king about it and gave Mordecai credit for the report, which, that's pretty cool. Like Esther, she didn't even take credit for herself. She just gave it to Mordecai. Once again, another honoring thing from Esther. So wow. When an investigation was made and Mordecai's story was found to be true, the two men were impaled on a sharpened pole. This was all recorded in the book of the history of King Xerxes' reign.
I think it's so cool when other books actually reference books outside of the Bible.
Yeah.
Like when the Bible references outside extra readings, I'm like, oh, that is so very, very cool.
Oh yeah, and how you can find these different books and you can correlate them. Like there's so many magnificent events that actually happen in the Bible, and I love how actually whenever it's a big event, like a lot of the times they'll record other books that also record it as well, just to show how factual it is. Which is very interesting.
Its genre is history, so I think it is like that's why so many eunuchs are named. Why we need to know that there's 7 or if there's 2, and then they list out each name. It's just to actually add credibility to the story, which I thought was very interesting when I was doing a little bit of research into commentaries. But at one point here, I gotta bring it out. It's so interesting to me. King Xerxes is this king that is like so consumed with this God complex. Like he's like all powerful, abundant, like drink all the wine in the world, whatever you want. Yet he is so powerless. Like this assassination is going on. And it would have gone through if it wasn't for Mordecai and if it wasn't for Esther.
You're so right. A man who's so powerful, yet he's so weak, as in he almost died at the hands of his own eunuchs. But then Mordecai stops it, which is fascinating to me too, because Mordecai, he could have seen this as, remember, if you listen to the last chapter, we were talking about we were talking about how whenever they were searching for a new queen, that really wasn't even the best thing, and how actually potentially even Esther was hidden for quite some time before they even found her, because it could have been a life of basically widowedness. And so also...
widowhood, yeah.
Yeah, of widowhood, thank you. But then also, not only that, Mordecai and all these other Jews, they are in exile right now. So this literally isn't their own king. They are underneath another kingdom, yet Mordecai decides, I'm going to defend the king's life, which is fascinating. How then, once again, here's another thing of honor, of Mordecai honors the king and protects the king's life.
It would have been so easy for Mordecai to be like, oh my gosh, we have been taken away from our native land. Mm-hmm. We're in exile. This assassination is God's plan for us. We're going to get free. We're going to get out of here. There's going to be a new king that's going to love us. But instead, in that situation, he just shows so much wisdom. Yeah, you're right. It's a spotlight on his character straight away. Our first introduction to Mordecai is, one, he loves Esther. He's always making sure he's still in her world. And two, he really honors when... Honestly, he's in a situation that would make it very hard to do so.
Moving on to chapter 3. Here we go.
Okay, so Haman's plot against the Jews. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, sometime later, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, over all the other nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire. All the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by, for so the king had commanded. But Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. Then the palace officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why are you disobeying the king's command?
So really interesting here.
Which is so different to what you were just saying.
Exactly.
He's honoring the king, and then all of a sudden he's dishonoring the king. What's up with that?
Literally 2 verses later, now he's stopped honoring the king. And I think there's a lot to why Mordecai doesn't bow down to Haman. And the reason why he's now breaking the law is because it's breaking his law with his God, which is you should not have anything else above your own God, and that you should have no gods above your own God. And so him bowing and showing this great reverence was basically him showing that he submits to a godlike authority. So it's not honoring authority in the sense of if Haman was his boss. No, it's more of worshiping. So it's bowing down and worshiping.
In Persian culture, literally, if you were to bow down, the Persians saw it as an act of reverence that bordered on recognizing the person as having godlike qualities or being divine.
Correct.
So you're right. Yeah.
So whenever you guys see him saying that he won't bow down, don't think of it as dude, why didn't you bow down and show honor and respect? It's literally him not wanting to worship this man.
It's funny to me. I love the line where it says, as the king had commanded. It's Haman, yes, he was being honored by all these people, but it was only because the king commanded it. So you're kind of well, is that really honor at all if you have to have someone to command that they honor you?
Well, there's even more to that, and I'll share that in just a minute. Again, I know I'm kind of teasing. I know I'm teasing so much, but there's even more to it. It's even deeper rooted than that, and so it gets fascinating. But anyways, verse 4. They spoke to him day after day. And again, this is the palace guards that are speaking to Mordecai right here. But still, he refused to comply with the order. So they spoke to Haman about this to see if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct, since Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all of the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes. I mean, wow, that is some serious hate.
That would have literally wiped out the entire Jewish people, because you got to remember how big King Xerxes' territory was. It was the largest empire to that point in time. So you think if he had annihilated, as he is intending to do, every Jewish person in the land of King Xerxes, that would be the entire population, the entire Jewish population. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And then also, there's a little bit of a background here that we should probably even give of even why Haman really even hates the Jews. Like this is just one other additive.
I freaked out when I heard this for the first time.
Okay.
I was like, mind blown.
So basically, guys, there's actually another story that we need to tell you about that actually happens in the book of Samuel. And so just go right ahead and take your mind out of this story for just a moment and just jump into this brand new story I'm about to share with you. But there's a moment in the book of Samuel where God goes to Saul. And he goes to Saul and he says, hey, you need to go and you need to wipe out this entire country of people, basically. Like it was like an entire town, like this entire race of people. He's like, you need to go, you need to kill the king, you need to kill the women and the children and kill all the livestock. And so it's like this pretty crazy thing that God asked for Saul to do. But Saul goes, and whenever he goes to kill all these people, and he doesn't kill everyone. He actually just defeats them. But then he decides to keep the king. He decides to keep a few other people alive. He decides to go right ahead and keep some of the livestock alive because he's like, hey, I could go right ahead and I can use this livestock for another purpose.
And he wanted to listen to the people as well. It was more that his like disobedience towards God was because he wanted to please his people.
That's
he wanted
right.
to please the people.
So here we go. We have a guy who's spared some people's lives and God asked him not to. And then what happens is the prophet Samuel, which is what the book's named after, Samuel goes to King Saul and he says, hey, why did you not wipe everyone out? And then he says, literally, because you've done this, you are no longer going to be king and God will appoint someone else in your place. And then that's where King David comes into the picture, the really famous king. I mean, known as one of the greatest kings of all time. But King David comes into the picture after that. So when I was younger and I heard this story, I was like, that makes kind of no sense to me. Like, yes, he didn't fully obey God, but is that really merit like this massive punishment of like being like dethroned? But here's the crazy thing. So if we go back here and if we look, it says where Haman comes from.
Crazy, because you got to remember here. So Haman, King Agag was the king that you're talking about in Samuel. And so he is a descendant of the Agagites or the Amalekites. That's what they were called back then. He's one of their descendants. Now, remember last episode when we were talking about Mordecai and that he was from royal descent and he had royal blood. He was like the son of Kish and Shimei. Well, guess who was the son of Kish? King Saul. And so literally we are having an ancient feud rebirthed. We have got Haman, the descendant of this people over here that the Lord said to wipe out.
Yeah.
And then we have King Saul's descendants, or actually not King Saul's descendants, Shimei's, but like a loose relative.
A close relative.
King Saul, royal blood, royal descent.
It's fascinating.
Like literally in the same room together.
Yes, and now actually for the rest of the story, they're going to become kind of almost two main characters that are going to be, I would say, almost like playing chess against each other. Like this kid's really crazy. I mean, obviously now you see this man Haman is so upset and he wants to kill literally every single Jew, right?
And there is one thing I just got to add in here. It actually goes back even further. So if you look at Exodus 17:15, there's a foretelling that the Lord would be at war with a people group from generation to generation. And that war was actually with the people of Amalek, which is the Amalekites again. And so it's even stems before the time of Samuel and before the time of King Saul. So this is literally a thing that's been going on for generation after generation after generation, which is, I think, why when Haman finds out that he's a Jew, he's like, all right, I'm going to destroy the whole people group.
And it really is fascinating that even just God in his mercy of almost trying to protect all these people in the future, like try to wipe out an entire people group.
That were fundamentally evil.
Fundamentally evil. Yes, fundamentally evil. So I'm going to re-pick it back up in verse 7. So in the month of April, during the 12th year of King Xerxes' reign, lots were cast in Haman's presence. The lots were called Purim to determine the best day and month to take action. And the day selected was March 7th, nearly a year later.
I've got to jump in there real quick.
Yeah.
So Purim were actually lots, and another way of looking at them is they were actually clay dye that were
kind of like
thrown.
dice.
Like dice that were thrown, and basically it was to find the lucky day. And so when you look back at the Persian, like the Persian calendar, Their year begins with the vernal equinox, which is also known as Nowruz. I think I'm saying that right, which marks the first day of spring. So the vernal equinox often occurred between like March 20th or 21st on our Gregorian calendar. Okay. And so what's very interesting here, why do I say all of that, is that he's throwing this die probably in late March, early April, and he is so committed to a lucky date that he already knows what he wants to do, that he nearly waits an entire year to execute it. Wow. Which to me is very interesting. Yeah. He was so committed for literally all the odds to be in his favor that he would wait a whole year. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'll go right ahead and I'll continue. So once again, the date that was to be selected was March 7th, nearly a year later. Okay, so verse 8. Then Haman approached King Xerxes. So whenever it says then Haman approached, it wasn't that he approached the king on March 7th. He actually approached the king right away, and this is still in the month of April. So then Haman approached King Xerxes and said, "There is a certain race of people scattered through all the provinces of your empire who keep themselves separate from everyone else. Their laws are different from those of any other people, and they refuse to obey the laws of the king. So it is not in the king's interest to let them live. If it pleases the king, issue a decree that they be destroyed, and I will give 10,000 large sacks of silver to the government administrators to be deposited in the royal treasury." So, wow. Okay, that's crazy.
That is a lot of money.
Yes,
that's crazy.
It is a ton of money. Actually, we went ahead and we even did some research to find out how much money it is. Babe, you should go right ahead and share.
Yeah. So 10,000 large sacks of silver, in equivalent to today's like terms and context, that is actually 375 tons in weight of silver. So we're talking about 375 tons of silver. And what they actually say back in that time was about, so if you think about a nation and how much money that they make in a year, it was about 2/3 of the entire revenue of that empire.
If we had 2/3 of the US's economy, of what the US makes every year, that would basically equal around $4.44 trillion.
I have no idea where this guy got his money from, but he's rich. Yes. Like, that is a lot of money.
And so this is a flat out massive bribe. I mean, this is pretty crazy. Let's just work back a little bit. How he says that these people, that their laws are different than everyone else's, and that they refuse to obey the king's laws.
Well, I thought that was interesting because when I was reading this, it just made me think about how often times when the enemy wants to oppose God's work or God's people, he kind of uses the same formula that Haman is using right here. And Haman, he comes in and he sounds very logical, but what he does is he kind of mixes a little bit of truth with a little bit of error and then with a whole lot of exaggeration.
Yeah.
And so the truth is, like, there are people, they are dispersed and scattered. That is a truth. They were dispersed and scattered. Then there's this half-truth that their customs are different. I mean, we've seen Mordecai and Esther already kind of show that they are not necessarily living separate to all the customs. I mean, Mordecai's name is literally after, most likely, a Babylonian god, and so is Esther's.
Yep.
And so Esther being from a Persian god. And so that's very interesting in itself. So there's a half-truth there. Some of them are different, some of them are not, their customs. And then there's a flat-out lie, who do not obey the king's laws. Like, we literally just saw Mordecai obey the king. We've also seen Esther obey the king. And so I think in the same way, it was interesting to me and it was highlighted to me that when the enemy is trying to oppose the work of God, he starts off
with truth.
With the truth, then it moves to a half-truth, and then it moves to a lie in order to persuade public opinion.
Correct.
And to persuade people.
What's really interesting, I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what's really interesting is this actually is a logical way of swaying people. I actually took a philosophy class, but it was all about the philosophy and the use of actually logic and how you use it to persuade people within arguments. It's literally like an algorithm. If A, then B, so C.
It's interesting to me though, because Haman, he's doing like imagining a boxer, it's like jab, jab, uppercut.
Yeah.
And I feel like the uppercut here, like he's done the jabs and then the jabs, but the uppercut here is he has this huge bribe, like this massive amount of money. So if it's not convincing enough, and I mean, he's kind of like showing that he's got skin in the game.
Yep.
Like, you know what? I am so committed to this. I believe in this so much that, yeah, my wealth, I will pour my wealth into this. And so it makes me think about today. And I know we've talked about this a bit just privately, just about bribes.
Oh, okay.
In general.
Yeah.
And how things are not always the way that they seem. And even just thinking about some recent situations that have gone on.
Really quick, I mean, babe, I do want to just preface this and say we do want to be careful with actually how we even position this. Yeah, guys, it's very interesting nowadays. We may think, hey, this is biblical times, man. That's crazy how a king's being swayed by this money,
or attempted to be swayed.
Yeah, and like this bribes happening, all these different things. It's very fascinating. It feels like, oh, well, that doesn't really happen today, but I know that a lot of people know a lot of these things do happen, and this is where I want to be careful with even how I phrase this, because I know that even you've done work within grant writing and getting grants. And what a grant is, if somebody doesn't know what a grant is that's basically a company will give you a large sum of money if you do A, B, or C. Mm-hmm. And
or even to just put more some.
Sure.
So it's basically if you have a program or if you have an initiative and you want funding for that, you can go to foundations or corporations or organizations or even individuals. Mm-hmm. And those people, if they like what you're doing and if your values align, and it's called giving priorities, if your giving priorities align, they will fund your project with whatever you asked for. Or even a portion of what you ask for, depending on what the situation is.
So if you're starting to connect these dots, it's very fascinating and very dirty, to be honest, to kind of play this way, because then you can see how somebody could really push their agenda. That there's lots of agendas, lots of political agendas, lots of just weird agendas, lots of stuff are pushed and are made to seem as they're normal, because giant corporations, if they go right ahead and like you said, do A, B, and C, then they get access to this money. They're okay with losing all these customers. They're okay with losing people as long as they can get access to literally grants that are worth like billions, if not trillions of dollars.
Even investments, especially there's like big companies like Blackstone and BlackRock and all the rest of it, like have trillions and trillions of dollars of assets. And I'm just saying, these companies like that, they have to have investment strategies. And so, I mean, if you want access to that, you got to align with their strategy. And so it does happen today, sadly. Yeah,
it's very, very fascinating stuff. And I want to actually point out one other really interesting thing. And this was the thing I was alluding to earlier. So whenever Mordecai didn't want to bow down to Haman. So you can look this up. This is a very interesting thing. But Haman had a symbol that was on his outfit.
Wait, is this a theory?
This is not a theory. This is actually something that people can look up. And whenever people bowed down to Haman, they were supposed to be bowing down to a symbol as well as the person.
Interesting.
Which is very fascinating if we think about even today, all these different, again, agendas, different symbols, ideologies that are really pushed around, that people kind of have to be like, hey, you need to submit to this. If you do not submit to this, then we'll do exactly what Haman wants to do. We will cancel you. We will cut you out of society. You are a people that does not belong because you do not align with the public consents, because you do not follow even this symbol. It's fascinating
Mordecai's
stuff.
Brave.
Oh, he's
very courageous
very
in this moment.
courageous, very, very courageous. So once again, I mean, we can see this book is very prevalent to today, but let's go right ahead and let's continue reading. I think we were at verse number 10.
10. Yes. Okay, so jumping in at verse 10. So the king agreed. Oh my gosh, the king agreed.
Yep,
confirming
so he agrees
his
to killing
decision.
All these people.
Yeah, by removing his signet ring from his finger and giving it to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Which again, Hammedatha the Agagite, that is listed because the Jewish people would have known in their original context, when they were hearing this story, they would have known of that ancient conflict.
Yep.
And so that's why it's listed again there. And then the king said, the money and the people are both yours to do with as you see fit. So on April 17th, which I just want to make a quick pause there. This is actually the eve of Passover for the Jewish people, which is when they celebrated actually being freed from Exodus, from Egypt, which is written in Exodus.
Yes, of course.
So their mass exodus out of Egypt. So on the eve of Passover, April 17th, the king's secretaries were summoned and a decree was written exactly as Haman cited, as Haman dictated. It was sent to the king's highest officers, the governors of the respective provinces and the nobles of each province in their own scripts and languages. The decree was written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with the king's signet ring. I mean, crazy, absolutely crazy. And then dispatches were sent by swift messengers into all the provinces of the empire, giving the order that all Jews, young and old, including women and children, must be killed, slaughtered, and annihilated on a single day. This was scheduled to happen on March 7th of the next year, Haman's lucky day, March 7th of the next year, and the property of all the Jews would be given to those who killed them, which is kind of like another bribe again.
So yeah, it's really shocking things. I mean, there's the bribes, there's this total hatred, which even we're going to talk about next time a little bit. There's this moment that you read, it was talking about basically Haman's name almost changed to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And that's even a very fascinating thing that we'll talk about next time. We're maybe taking a little bit too much time this time, so we'll talk about next time. But
there's a lot to that.
Yeah, we talked to a rabbi about that, and there's some very fascinating things in there. But this is, and I mean, we need to probably finish up this chapter. But this is a very convicting, I think, chapter of really convicting us of like, hey, we need to really be looking into things. We need to understand any time that even thoughts, massive opinions about different things are being pushed, whether if they seem good or bad. You need to do your
roots.
Yes. What are the roots? Is there truth? Is there any fallacies within these statements that are then actually making the whole thing false? And so let's go right ahead. Let's wrap up this chapter. I'm going to go right ahead. We still
have 14 to 15 to go.
Yep. So I'll go right ahead. I can just read it. I'll read it. A copy of this decree was issued as law in every province and proclaimed to all the peoples so that they would be ready to do their duty on the appointed day. At the king's command, the decree was sent out by swift messengers, and it was also proclaimed in the fortress of Susa. Then the king and Haman sat down to drink. They sit down and they get drunk. Oh my gosh. But the city of Susa fell into confusion.
The whole city of Susa. That means Jews and non-Jews alike.
Yeah.
Everybody's just bewildered. Everybody's just confused.
And going back to what you were just talking about earlier, it was the Passover. It was supposed to be, again, a time where they celebrate freedom, where they were celebrating freedom of getting free from the Egyptians.
Being delivered.
Being delivered.
From their oppression.
Of slavery, all these different things. Now they're like, oh my gosh, now we are all doomed to die.
We are marked to die.
We are doomed to die, and everyone is incentivized to kill us. And so it is a very dark time.
And there's such a separation here. You can see from Haman and the king who is like getting drunk and kind of like, or drinking, or you know what, doing somewhat a light celebratory activity on this side of the spectrum. And on the other side of the spectrum, the people who are receiving the news are like, what is going on? Like, what in the world? And I bet some of the non-Jews, because you got to imagine that like this was the Persian Empire. There were a lot of different people groups that were actually like captured and kind of conquered during all of like Persia's conquests. And so there's a lot of different people groups here being represented, the Jews being one of them. And so I bet the other people groups too were like, well, is this going to be us next?
Yeah.
Like, how do we know that we can actually trust that this is going to be not us the next time? So I bet that contributed to all this confusion and bewilderment.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, guys, I think this is a great place to go right ahead and stop the reading here. Obviously, if you can't wait on this cliffhanger too long, you are always able to go right ahead, find a Bible, and read this for yourself. But guys, this has just been so much fun. We know that this has been maybe a bit of a more challenging episode, and I would really encourage people, hey, go ahead and do the research yourself. Go ahead, look into these things. If there's any things you have questions about, look into it. Like, we encourage you that this is not just a end-all be-all, this podcast. This is an area to build intrigue. This is an area to build excitement. This is an area to build wonder.
And to go deep.
But yes, to definitely go deep, hence the name Out of the Shallows, of course. And so, guys, we don't want this to be something that it just stops here. So please continue your own journey as well. Guys,
and I do want to jump in.
Yeah,
I know there's been a lot of heaviness in this, and I know we talked a lot about bribes, but we didn't really talk about the main theme, which was actually going on here, which is the destruction of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
And so I would just want to recognize that we haven't talked about that yet, but we will be in the next episode. We'll be addressing a lot of that. We just wanted to give it the time and the space to talk to it, because we do know we're living in days where we're seeing kind of similar things out working. And so we wanted to make sure that that had space. So
yes, and you won't want to miss that, because there's some very fascinating, interesting
correlations.
Just correlation, history, research that goes into it. So we'll get into that next week. But guys, anyways, thank you so much for listening. And hey, make sure you're writing in comments or writing reviews. We really appreciate them. We love seeing them. It definitely helps us out whenever we get to hear from you. So please go right ahead and write them. We just love to even hear from you. As well, make sure that you are liking and subscribing. It helps you go right ahead and get more of content like this. It also helps us out too. But it also, of course, will help you for next time whenever we release a new episode. It's going to be right in your inbox or wherever you go right ahead and listen to the podcast. Also, make sure to check out our website too. If you just go to outoftheshallows.com, and then you can go right ahead and just see different things on there, find out a little bit more about the show. Until next time, guys, thank you so much again for joining us. I'm Alec.
And I'm Maddie Bevere.
And this has been
Out of the Shallows.